The Widow, Episode 11. The moon was large and full, bathing the city in its silvery light. A widow for a year, Isabel felt the ice in her heart begin to melt under Ricardo's passionate gaze. But happiness was a forbidden street. A secret from the past, a secret involving the death of her beloved husband, threatened to destroy everything. Someone was watching Isabel, hidden in the shadows, and their eyes gleamed with a deadly fury. It was a silent danger, an enemy about to strike, to prevent Isabel from finding peace and love again. Who would it be? And what would they do to separate the couple? The moon, round and bright like a giant pearl, illuminated the balcony where Isabel and Ricardo were. The air was perfumed with the jasmine blooming in the garden, and a gentle silence, broken only by the sound of crickets, enveloped the couple. Isabel, in a long, flowing dress, looked like a vision. Morning still clothed her, but her eyes, once gray and dull, now shone with a new light, a flame ignited by Ricardo. He looked at her with admiration, his fingers lightly brushing hers. That touch, so delicate, so full of respect and affection, was a balm for Isabel's wounded soul. A year ago, the death of her beloved Daniel had left her in pieces, an immense void that Ricardo was slowly filling with life again. But Isabel's happiness was a fragile secret at the mercy of the wind, a secret she guarded carefully like a precious and threatened treasure. She still carried the pain of Daniel's loss, the guilt that haunted her, and the shadow of doubt about the real cause of his death. The medical report said accident, but in her heart, Isabel knew something wasn't right. That terrible day, the torrential rain, the car out of control, it was like a nightmare she couldn't forget. And there was also the suspicion of another person involved, someone very close. Ricardo, noticing the sudden change in Isabel's expression, approached her tenderly. He knew that the ghost of the past still haunted her, followed her like an uncomfortable shadow, but he believed that their love was strong enough to overcome any obstacle. With a gentle gesture, he lifted her face, forcing her to look at him. His eyes, full of affection, were like a mirror, reflecting all the pain and hope that dwelled in her heart. "Isabel, what's wrong?" Ricardo asked, his voice low and worried. "You seem distant." Isabel hesitated for a moment. Telling Ricardo about her suspicions would be opening an even deeper wound in her soul, exposing the fear that paralyzed her. But it would also mean sharing the burden she carried alone, sharing her secret. But there was another shadow, bigger than her doubts, darker than fear itself, the shadow of hatred. A silent, deadly hatred lurking in the shadows of the night. While Isabel wrestled with her thoughts, something moved among the bushes in the garden. A quick flash, a dark figure that disappeared as quickly as it appeared. It was only an instant, but enough for Isabel to feel a chill run down her spine. The familiar feeling of being watched, of being in danger, returned with full force. It wasn't just the guilt of the past or the ghosts of her memory. It was something real, threatening, present. Ricardo noticed the tension in Isabel's body, the fear that shone in her eyes. He gently squeezed her hand, transmitting all his strength, all his love. He knew something was wrong, that a new danger was approaching. The romance that blossomed between them was on the brink of an abyss, threatened not only by the past, but by a sinister and invisible presence. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the night, a pair of furious eyes watched them. It was Alvaro, Daniel's brother, a man consumed by hatred and revenge. He couldn't accept the idea of Isabel finding happiness again, so soon after his brother's death. To Alvaro, Isabel was his, always would be his. He wouldn't allow anyone to come between him and his dark plans. And what he planned was as cold and calculated as the fixed gaze he kept on the couple from a distance. The full moon was a silent witness to his plan, a silent accomplice to his designs. Revenge would be sweet as the love he could never have, the love that Isabel dedicated to the wrong man, for him. The icy fear ran down Isabel's spine. Peace, love, everything was at stake. The fight for her happiness was just beginning. Ricardo's hand, strong and secure, squeezed Isabel's, transmitting some of his courage. But the fear she felt was deeper than any words could express. That flash, quick as lightning, among the bushes, was not a product of her imagination. It was real as the pain that still caused her the memory of the accident. The accident that took Daniel, her beloved husband, and which in her heart she knew had not been a mere accident. The torrential rain of that night, the car out of control, Everything seemed so intentional, so calculated. And the figure she had spotted in the bush, the dark and menacing silhouette, reminded her of someone very close, someone who always watched her, stalked her with eyes of hatred and envy. Ricardo, noticing the tremor that ran through Isabel's body, hugged her tighter, whispering words of comfort in her ear. He was there for her, to protect her from any danger, but he didn't know what the threat was. What could be more dangerous than the shadow of the past itself? He wanted to know Isabel's secret, the weight she carried with her, so he could help her face it, but she hesitated. Telling the truth meant plunging into a whirlwind of painful emotions, of guilt, of disturbing memories that tormented her. As they embraced, a new sound broke the quiet of the night. A dull thud coming from inside the house, breaking glass. Isabel's heart pounded. Ricardo released her, and they both ran inside, cautious, light steps, searching for the source of the noise. The house was silent, dark, except for the faint light coming from the moon, which crept through the windows, creating long, ghostly shadows. Isabel and Ricardo looked at each other, fear etched on their faces. It was just a noise, she told herself, a cat, a tree. But the feeling of danger persisted, stronger than before. Suddenly, a scream. A woman's scream, full of terror. A scream that froze Isabel's blood and made her feel a pang of terrible foreboding. The scream came from the kitchen, and Isabel knew, instinctively, what it meant. The fear that had been haunting her was materializing. It was a trap. They had fallen into a trap. The trap of Alvaro, Daniel's brother, who until then was only a dark shadow in her thoughts, had become something tangible, something terrifying. Ricardo, with the speed of a cat, pulled Isabel behind a wall, shielding her with his body. They both heard heavy footsteps approaching, followed by a loud thud as if something heavy had fallen to the floor. Silence returned, heavy, oppressive. A deadly silence followed by a new sound, the sound of a car speeding away like someone fleeing. Panic seized Isabel. What was Alvaro's trap? Who had screamed? Was it someone he had kidnapped, or was it a trick? The doubt tormented her more than any certainty, because doubt carried with it the worst of nightmares, and the fear of seeing the worst happen was more painful than any truth she could imagine. The quick, silent steps of Ricardo beside her gave her security, but for how long would the security last? She and Ricardo slowly, cautiously made their way to the kitchen. There, they found a terrible scene which froze Isabel's blood, a struggle, an overturned chair, and broken glass. But worst of all was the small note, left on the table, written in a thick, threatening handwriting. A note containing only one word, next. The moon, round and bright, witnessed the romantic scene on the balcony. Isabel, in her flowing dress, seemed to be reborn under Ricardo's passionate gaze. But happiness was ephemeral, a fragile flame threatened by furious winds. The past, like a stubborn shadow, haunted her. The death of Daniel, her beloved husband, an accident according to the police, but a mystery in her heart. The torrential rain, the car out of control, something didn't fit. And there was the suspicion, someone close. Ricardo, noticing Isabel's anguish, tried to soothe her with his affection. His delicate touch was a balm, but the shadow of doubt hung over them, a movement in the bush, a quick flash which faded into the night. A shiver ran down Isabel's spine. She wasn't just fighting her ghosts, a real danger lurked. The fear etched in Isabel's eyes did not go unnoticed by Ricardo. He held her hand, transmitting all his strength, all his love. But the danger was closer than they imagined. In the shadows, Alvaro, Daniel's brother, watched with hatred. He did not accept Isabel's happiness, the possibility of her loving again. To Alvaro, Isabel was his, and no one else would have her. His dark eyes gleamed with a cruel plan, an elaborate revenge. While Isabel and Ricardo indulged in hesitant tenderness, the malignant presence drew closer. A dull thud, breaking glass inside the house, broke the enchantment of the night. Fear turned to panic. They ran inside, the house dark, silent, except for the moonlight peeking through the windows, casting shadows that seemed to dance. Suddenly, a woman's scream, a scream of terror, cut through the darkness. A scream that echoed in Isabel's ears, freezing her blood. The scream from the kitchen, a terrible premonition struck her. A trap. They had fallen into Alvaro's trap. Ricardo, with quick reflexes, pulled Isabel behind a wall, protecting her with his body. Heavy footsteps approached, followed by a thud. Silence returned, dense, suffocating, and then a car speeding away. An escape. The tension was unbearable. What was Alvaro's plan? Who had screamed? Doubt gnawed at Isabel more than any certainty. Any certainty was better than the anguish of uncertainty, the fear of the worst. The safety of Ricardo's arms was the only comfort, but for how long? They cautiously went to the kitchen. The scene was terrifying. A struggle, an overturned chair, broken glass. And there, on the table, a note, written in heavy, threatening handwriting, a single word, next. Terror froze Isabel's heart. Alvaro's game had begun, and she was the next target. But what would come next? Fear invaded everything, as Isabel realized that the fight for her happiness was far from over. The trap was set, and the real battle for her life and her love was just beginning. The shadow of the past, the threat of the present, and the uncertainty of the future united in a whirlwind of emotions that promised an even more tense episode, full of twists and dark secrets. Suddenly, the phone rings. An unknown number. Isabel answers, trembling. On the other end of the line, a distorted voice whispers, "You think you escaped? I know where your daughter is, Isabel, and she's in danger.